Dear people around the world who are still searching for the truth, I wish you a 2026 full of achievements. I myself have sincerely joined this effort to seek and expose the truth over the past 6 years. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have imagined that I could have something important to convey to people. I wouldn't have thought that my voice could have any role in this world. My name is Geanina Hagimă. I am a Romanian gynecologist and I work in my own office. Throughout my training as a doctor, I focused on obtaining the most complete and high-performance training, making many sacrifices, as other doctors who love their profession did, out of the desire to provide people with the best care possible and at the highest possible standards. Although I have suffered many injustices throughout my career until COVID, I did not realize that the healthcare system is so corrupt and manipulable. I didn't think that professional medical bodies are not actually created to raise professional standards, but for censorship and control, as has become evident over the last 6 years. I didn't think that the pharmaceutical industry could go so far as to deliberately create disease and even death. For me, the fact that a huge proportion of medical staff choose to remain silent, to obey, to tacitly accept the medical aberration of so-called COVID pandemic was shocking. I would never have thought that doctors could be controlled and manipulated to such an extent, with such an efficiency, although I was aware that there were levels of control and manipulation over them. During the COVID period, I chose to get involved in exposing the lie. In addition to manipulative medical information in the media and the pressures and unjustified constraints on people, I found after minimal research that this so-called pandemic is not just a simple accident of nature, but is a piece of a larger picture that involves a profound change in the world we live in, a fact that requires a firm attitude from many people. After noticing that my petitions, backed up by studies, were not being answered, that medical information was being misrepresented by the media, and that pressure to inject the population with experimental COVID vaccines was increasing, I felt it was my duty as a citizen, as a mother, as a doctor to speak out and share the information I had read with my fellow citizens. And since it was a medical issue, who could have spoken more knowledgeable than a doctor, who in addition to medical experience also has an ease of searching, reading, understanding, interpreting, and presenting medical information. Fortunately, several doctors from Romania and around the world have been involved in this effort to expose the medical truth. I'm delighted to mention important names that have made a difference, such as Professor Ray Bhattacharya, current director of the U.S. National Institute of Health, one of the authors of the Great Barrington Declaration, Dr. Robert Malone, currently a member of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, a committee within the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and the late Arne Burkhardt, pathologist, professor of pathology, and Dr. Luc Montagnier, professor of virology. The silence, the lack of involvement of most doctors in the COVID issue, but also of a large part of the people in general, achieved through various means of control and pressure, have brought us to the current situation in which, in addition to the medical problems caused by the measures taken during the COVID period, including COVID vaccination, Many other problems have arisen, financial, educational, crises that were premeditated, being used for the rapid implementation of digitalization, the fourth industrial revolution, biodigital convergence, and the 2030 agenda. People being either sick or gripped by various fears or preoccupied with financial security issues or overwhelmed by all kinds of information meant to destroy reason, no longer had the ability to focus on truly important issues, such as finding out the real reason for the COVID vaccination, for the acceptance of which there was enormous and illogical pressure, finding out the real composition of the COVID vaccines, something extremely important even if access to the vials and the possibilities for investigation were limited. And finally, punishing those guilty of premeditating the COVID situation. If people had not been betrayed by researchers and doctors, if they had not been so divided and saturated with contradictory information due to the premeditated cognitive war we find ourselves in, they would have learned what was being prepared for them during the COVID period. If people had not been so ignorant, they would have learned about intentions to rapidly establish total control through biodigital convergence, that is, with the help of largely invisible technology that people know nothing about and that are found and operate not only outside of us, but also inside our bodies. Nanotechnology with nanosensors, nano-effectors that can operate remotely, nano-level communications of electromagnetic molecular optogenetic type, 5G, 6G technologies which, in addition to causing a toxic electromagnetic soup for everything living, are used to transmit a large amount of data necessary for the functioning of nano and non-nano networks such as Internet of Things, the Internet of Bodies, the Internet of Everything, technology that communicate with the brain and through which it can be controlled, non-invasive brain-computer interfaces that use nanotechnology, artificial intelligence necessary for the acquisition and processing of huge volumes of data in real time. I didn't know about these technologies either until COVID, but over the past 4 years, through my research work and by gathering documents and information from Telegram and Rumble non-vaxxer 420 channels or Sabrina Welles Psynergy channel, I have found that there is a huge volume of official documents on these topics. Although official documents on biodigital convergence abound, people know almost nothing about it, because the information is censored and because those who have been involved in exposing the COVID lie hardly ever talk about this invisible technology that aim to profoundly and irreversibly transform the world we live in. Information about these plans appears on the government website of Israel and Canada, in articles, brochures, and conferences of organizations such as IEEE, International Telecommunication Union, International Electrotechnical Commission, EU Graphene Flagship, and in projects, courses, conferences of many medical engineering universities around the world. These technologies are considered indispensable for achieving the goals of Agenda 2030, whose motto is transforming our world and leaving no one behind, even though these technologies are inexplicably unknown to people, unregulated, toxic, and capable of destroying the world we live in. All UN member countries are involved in achieving the objectives of Agenda 2030, working closely together rather than competing with each other, and all resources are being mobilized. Also, we must not ignore the fact that the biodigital convergence industry is a huge one with huge profits. As for COVID vaccinations, although a large part of the world's population now understand that it was a mistake, and although there is abundant information and evidence to support this, the truth has not been fully revealed so that those who premeditated the COVID action can be investigated, tried, and convicted. Although there are many important voices of doctors in the US who talk about the adverse effects of COVID vaccines, the spike protein resulting from the translation of modified RNA and DNA contamination of COVID vaccines, almost no one talks about the lipid nanoparticles in COVID vaccines, about systemic biodistribution on almost all tissues and organs, including the brain, about the polyethylene glycol in the composition of these particles that prevents the immune system from taking up the nanoparticles, favoring their entry into the systemic circulation. Although well-known and professional doctors engage in the search for and exposure of truth, such as Dr. Robert Malone, Dr. Ryan Cole, and others, do not talk about the particularities of these nanoparticles, about their toxicity despite efforts to make them biocompatible, or about the fact that nanomedicine is not regulated. There are studies published even in the US National Nanotechnology Initiative Environmental Health and Safety Research Strategy 2024 update, such as clinical approval of nanotechnology-based SARS-CoV-2 mRNA vaccines, impact on translational nanomedicine, dated January 29, 2021, which states the following. Although each of these nanomedicine vaccines uses a slightly different and proprietary formulation, most of these vaccines are liposome or solid nanoparticle formulations. The first large-scale study of the population effect of nanomedicine is underway, and this study is expected to be ongoing and sustained. The field of nanomedicine will have large-scale validated and sustained safety and efficacy data. As adverse events are analyzed and understood, this will help to maintain the paradigm shift away from the unknown risk and the future application. The benefit of current SARS-CoV-2 vaccines approved and in development using liposome or other types of nanoparticles is that there will be a large amount of data on an entire category of nanodrug delivery systems, lipid nanoparticles. The approval of SARS-CoV-2 nanomedicine-based vaccines is establishing the foundation for developing more complex systems such as actively targeted systems and systems for combination drug delivery. Taking simple formulation one step further, beside pegylation, the surface of the nanoparticles to help avoid aggregation and immune clearance, the dramatic surface area of nanoparticles can be functionalized with targeting residues that bind to disease-specific receptors. The current large phase 4 clinical trial has initiated the beginning of a paradigm shift away from the unknown risk of nanomedicine toward how nanomedicine can enable clinical solutions. The tremendous production, distribution, and administration of the first 4.68 million doses of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines have initiated the largest population study of nanomedicine. This phase 4 clinical trial is helping to answer the historical question of what are the unknown risks of lipid nanoparticles. As safety and efficacy data is gathered and adverse events are analyzed, a smooth and clear pathway for the development of more complex and non-lipid nanomedicine will be established. As the globe continues through the uncharted waters of the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, it is clear we are in the midst of unprecedented scientific excellence and collaboration and unprecedented success for translational nanomedicine. As nanomedicine is a critical component of many SARS-CoV-2 vaccine solutions, translational nanomedicine has finally advanced beyond infancy, and the future developments and applications are assured to be astounding. Why are these studies, these statements of great importance, ignored by doctors themselves? It is therefore officially acknowledged without mincing words that we are in a global experiment to test nanoparticles, and yet this information does not reach the general population, as doctors do not talk about this issue. Shouldn't doctors start addressing this little-known, unregulated field of nanomedicine? I consider this information to be very important given the intention to use nanoparticles widely in both allopathic and naturopathic medicine. Furthermore, there is evidence from independent studies in the US, Germany, Spain, Canada, the UK, Argentina, and Romania that COVID vaccines contain undeclared elements, some of which are toxic, related to nanotechnology. Let us recall the recent, very important study from October 2024 by researchers in Argentina. At least 55 undeclared chemical elements found in COVID-19 vaccines, and the ongoing struggle, including in the courts, that these brave Argentine researchers are waging. Although this information comes from highly credible sources, I have not seen any effort by the fighters for the truth and freedom who now occupy key position in the American healthcare system to conduct a complete chemical analysis and nanotechnological characterization of these experimental products known as COVID vaccines. In my opinion, opening up the topic of the nanocomponent of COVID vaccines would be the moment when debates about COVID vaccines would truly become serious and sincere. Unfortunately, so far we have been going around in circles without reaching any conclusions that would resolve the issue of COVID vaccines and punish those guilty of abuse, pressure, and experiments carried out on the global population. The delay in revealing the full truth about deaths and severe adverse reactions following COVID vaccination, the concealment of the purpose of testing lipid nanoparticles on humans through COVID vaccination, endless discussion about mRNA and the spike protein, but with the systematic ignoring of the nanolipid component of these vaccines, the ignoring of their undeclared composition, and the lack of a firm demand for an official analysis of the composition of these products are real obstacles to clarifying the truth and punishing those responsible. I believe it would be useful for doctors who talk about mRNA and the spike protein to also start talking about the nanolipid component and to look into independent studies that indicate the presence of undeclared elements in these products. Otherwise, they may be suspected of trying to prevent the truth from coming out and of finding truly effective remedies for those affected by these products. Furthermore, postponing the disclosure of the truth leads to the continuation of abuse by professional organizations against doctors who had the integrity and normality to speak out about medical aberration during the COVID period. I find myself in such a situation, being investigated groundlessly and illegally by the Romanian College of Physicians, not for any medical misconduct, but for my evidence-based statements regarding the measures taken by the authorities during the COVID period, including COVID vaccination, and also because more recently I spoke again with irrefutable evidence about the role of COVID and COVID vaccines in the implementation of biodigital convergence, about unregulated nanotechnology, about the Internet of Bodies, about intracorporeal nanonetworks, at multidisciplinary conferences entitled COVID-19 and Biodigital Convergence, organized in Romania in 2025. Thus, such investigations by medical bodies that can revoke your right to practice medicine violate fundamental human rights such as the right to free speech and the right to work. The National Conference on Bioethics, the Romanian National Conference of Bioethics, an annual event recognized and credited with continuing medical education points by Romanian College of Physicians, this year has no longer recognized. The last year has no longer recognized and credited with EMC points. One of the reasons being the fact that papers of doctors under disciplinary investigation were accepted, so it was about my situation. At this conference, I presented two well-documented papers, Neuroethics and Neuronal Rights in the Age of Nanotechnology and Cognitive Warfare, and Is Medicine 4.0 for humans or for transhumans? Therefore, instead of approaching the light at the end of the tunnel, medical dictatorship is intensifying, with people's attention constantly being diverted from the truth. Instead of getting involved themselves in finding out the truth, people are waiting for saviors who are slow to come, with the number of victims continuing to rise. The promises of new politicians have not materialized. On the contrary, it is becoming increasingly clear that they intend to achieve the objectives of 2030 agenda by facilitating and implementing biodigital convergence. It makes me want to cry when I realize what is happening to our world, the world in which our children are growing up, the world in which they could have achieved their dreams, being healthy, free, and happy. Unfortunately, people are still blind. While the plan to change the world we live in is so well thought out and is advancing steadily and quickly. Do we still have a chance? Although it is late, I believe we still do, but only if we open our eyes, quickly try to understand the situation we are in, and get involved. And don't forget to tell the doctors who are fighting for the truth and freedom to speak about the nanoparticles in COVID vaccines, about unregulated toxic nanotechnology, to demand official chemical and nanotechnological analysis of COVID vaccines, and to inform themselves from multiple official sources about biodigital convergence. And one more thing. Perhaps doctors will strive to respond to the following medical issue. If COVID vaccine really contain mRNA encoding the spike antigenic protein inside the lipid nanoparticles, giving the large number of nanoparticles contained in injections, giving the systemic distribution of nanoparticles acknowledged by even by the manufacturers, considering the avoidance of immune cells by the presence of polyethylene glycol molecules on the surface of the nanolipid particles, considering the incorporation of these nanoparticles by healthy cells in the body, considering the production of the spike protein by healthy non-immune cells and its exposure on their surface, so that these healthy non-immune cells become targets of the immune system, no one who was injected would have survived the vaccination, which did not happen. As immunology specialist Dr. Dolores Cahill stated at the beginning of the vaccination campaign, a large population of those vaccinated should have died within 2 to 3 years of receiving the vaccine. We have all seen that there have been numerous adverse reactions, including deaths, but there have also been many people who tolerated this injection well, even though there were no placebo vaccines, and this is not just my opinion. Don't you think it's time to ask ourselves this question and find out what the real intention behind the COVID vaccination was and what these vaccines actually contain? Given the investigation by independent researchers into the composition of vaccines, as well as studies that cynically claim that COVID vaccination was a global phase 4 study for testing nanoparticles for the new era of medicine, it is clear to me that this mass vaccination was for the injection of nanoparticles, for biodigital convergence, for the new transhumanist era of total control, for so-called personalized medicine, which offer real-time diagnosis and treatment through nanoparticles remotely controlled by 5G, 6G technologies and artificial intelligence, transforming the world we live in into a huge digital hospital, as described in articles about Medicine 4.0. All for own good, but without our consent. Given these facts, dear doctors fighting for the truth, do you believe we can overcome the stage of manipulation with the spike protein? Thank you, dear people, for your patience in listening to my message. Thank you.